Hello and welcome everyone to our latest webinar in the FT Digital Dialogue series. And today the Financial Times is in partnership with EXL to talk about the new challenges of the digital first business and how you maintain customer loyalty in what is a very volatile environment at the moment. I'm Chris Nussel, Assistant Tech Editor at the Financial Times and lead writer of its daily Tech FT newsletter. What we'll be focusing on today is digital first businesses in healthcare, insurance and other industries, and how they can maximize these new opportunities out there and minimize the threats. We'll be uncovering all of that and more over the next 40 minutes, and then there'll be 10 minutes at the end for your questions, which we'd encourage you to ask at any time through the Q&A box you should see on the right of your screen. Also, feel free to share your thoughts and tweets on social media with the hashtag FT Digital Dialogues. Let me introduce you to our speakers today. Joining us from the East Coast of the US is Rohit Kapoor, who is co-founder and chief executive of EXL. He's made investments in areas such as advanced automation, analytics, and artificial intelligence to position EXL as a strategic digital transformation partner that now employs over 32,000 professionals serving clients across 5 continents. Also on the East Coast is Clarke Murphy, chief executive of Reynolds Associates, the global leadership advisory and executive search firm based in New York. He's been with the company since 1988 and in his time has conducted numerous Fortune 100 board searches and enabled other CEO successions. Here in the UK, we have David McMillan, Chief Executive of Esure Group, one of the UK's leading providers of motor and home insurance. Prior to Esure, he was a senior executive at insurance companies QBE and Aviva, and he's worked all over the world in insurance. So we have someone who can talk about his company and his experience as a digital first business. We have Rohit on data and services, and we have Clarke as the people person here that's so essential to getting the right talent to tackle these things. Thank you all for joining me, and perhaps we can kick off the discussion with the elephant in the room or the coronavirus in the room. I guess this is always an issue, any kind of webinar I've conducted over the past few months. There's never been a greater need to be digital first at this time, of course. We're still in the midst of this pandemic. Rohit, can I start with you and ask, how do you help the companies you work with rapidly adapt to what is an unprecedented situation?
Thanks, Chris. And I just want to welcome everybody for joining us and thank you for spending some time with us out here. So the COVID pandemic has certainly been a catalyst in terms of accelerating the pace of change around digital transformation, as well as making companies adopt digital first methodologies and business models and really integrate that into all of their business and operations. For EXL, we focus in on something which is the bedrock of digital transformation and digital first business models, and that is data. The data part of it is a critical element, and it's becoming more and more important in its usage and in terms of value creation as we go forward. We help our clients leverage data in 2 fundamental ways. One, we help them make better business decisions using data. And that's all about how can we make sure that the data is usable, create predictive models that will generate insights, and then apply those insights into their operations. The second part of this is all about how do you embed real-time intelligence into core operating processes of our clients. And we again leverage that data, apply digital technologies, apply advanced automation, apply AI and ML, and embed that into operating processes so that we can enhance the end customer experience, improve business outcomes, and improve efficiency. So 2 fundamental ways: analytics, which is making better business decisions out of data, and second is about embedding intelligence into customer operations. And I think that's something which is resonating really well at this point of time. I mean, we'd love to kind of see how this progresses and moves forward.
Thank you, Rohit. Clarke, can I ask you perhaps on the people side of things, what kind of skill sets do you see being needed from leaders at this rather difficult time for anyone?
Well, you've never seen the skill sets adapt, even what was needed in March and April and what's needed in August and September. But on the one hand, I think boards are saying Are you decisive enough? Are you agile enough to pivot quickly, even a couple of times within 9 or 10 months? So the sense of agility, I think, is very important. Dealing with ambiguity probably speaks for itself. But this balance of agility and pivot with decisiveness, and then the show of empathy for the health and wellness of your workforce. As we say, we don't work from home, you live at work now. And so what's the leader's sense of this anxiety? So you're changing business models. We're going to talk about transformation today and responding to changing markets. Enormous pressure on the workforce and the executive team while they are going through their own anxiety. So I think it's this balance of transformation and decisiveness, but also empathy and authenticity to recognize what's going on in the world, but the business has to change. So the last bit is communication skills. You could have everything I already described, but if the board doesn't feel that you have communicated well with them, with stakeholders, with shareholders, you might forget the first part. So it's a really, really different from any crisis that we've seen leadership attributes before.
Absolutely. David, what changes have there been to your digital business brought on by COVID-19?
Well, I think, Chris, and hi everyone. I think you very kindly described us as a digital first business. I think the reality is we're on a journey to being a digital first business, and just picking up one of the words that Clarke used, pivot. We've had to pivot massively this year. We announced that we were taking all of our employees out of the office and moving them home, as many companies did. The first pivot there was we needed to find 2,000 PCs over the course of 3 or 4 days. The whole of the rest of the world was trying to buy PCs at that point. And it's been a real journey for us. We've had to learn to lead in a different way. I'm massively proud of the way that my people and our leaders have really stood up and leaned in and really adapted also to changing customer requirements. I think both Rohit and Clarke are absolutely right. The customer demand for self-service, the customer demand for digital has certainly accelerated during this period. And we've all done a lot of things we never thought we'd be doing. One for me was running a 2-day digital conference on Zoom, which we did for 120 of our top leaders a couple of weeks ago. I never thought I would ever be doing something like that as we went into the year. So, you know, an enormous time of change for everyone. And I think a lot of us as leaders will come out of 2020 a lot stronger and better as a result of the challenge.
And David, as we look at business growth strategies and how they're evolving with different product designs and approaches, and digitally native, can you give us some examples of how you're evolving that?
Well, I think Chris, we talked earlier in the week about digital not just being a channel, and I think certainly the way I view digital is it's an opportunity to provide a much richer and much better experience for customers. There's an opportunity to put greater speed to take decisions quicker, whether that's the decision in my world to repair or replace a car, whether that's decisions on fraud or a whole bunch of things. I think there's also an opportunity to provide really simple and transparent processes and experiences for customers. We've done a calculation. We think there are probably in the range of 150 pain points for customers in the way that we currently do business. So there's a massive opportunity to move all of that pain into beautiful experiences for customers. And there's also an opportunity to provide much greater value over time, whether that's using new technology like pay-as-you-drive or usage-based insurance, or whether that's joining up with ecosystem partners to provide a much richer and more interesting service. And I think in that respect, I think some of the stuff that challengers like Revolut have done in the banking sector, taking foreign currency, which is a really quite an ugly customer experience, and making it something that customers really love doing because it's so neat and it's so value adding.
And thank you, David. Yeah, Rohit, what advice are you giving to customers as they seek to design new products for their digital first businesses?
So Chris, I think the first thing that has happened is that the digital adoption has increased by the end customer. And not only has that increased one time, 75% of all users that have switched over to a digital channel now say they're going to be using this going forward into the future. So even when the pandemic is done, it's likely that we're going to continue to engage with end customers using digital channels. But I think the trick in this thing is not to overthink it. Sometimes our clients want to introduce digital everywhere, and they want to automate every single human interaction that they might be. Or they want to be able to deploy digital in every facet of their business. That's simply not possible and not advisable. I think what you have to do is optimize. You have to figure out which are the elements that can actually be automated early, and you can remove friction points like David mentioned. You've got to figure out which are the channels where you can make it easier and much more convenient for customers to be able to access information, take decisions, and move on. And then which are those where there is still going to be a human interaction, but how do you integrate that human interaction along with a digital interaction? That is critical. I think there are a couple of things which are obviously coming in as trends as we go forward. Number one, there is a need to get hyper personalized. Every single customer today is a digital customer and expects to be served with offerings which are customized to them, and it has to be very, very relevant and at the right time and at the right price for that particular individual. So you've got to take a look at historical data and preferences. You've got to be able to predict with accuracy as to what the future preferences might be and offer that up. But then you've got to do this in a manner which is slightly ahead of customer expectations so that you can get customer delight. I think that's what is critical. I just want to close with one other comment and pick up on what David spoke about. And he spoke about a customer journey identifying 150 different pain points which need to kind of get eliminated or reduced. Well, the trick in terms of embracing digital is really not to think about the customer journey as a straight line or as a linear process, because humans like to change things up and humans are unpredictable. And therefore, you've got to design your digital customer journey with the expectation that there will be some unexpected things that will happen along the way, and you have to be able to deal with that. So at EXL, for example, we have recently launched an AI-infused customer experience capability, which we call as Excelia. And Excelia has the capability that when a person changes their mind or reverses the order or does something which is going to be totally unexpected, you don't have to start gathering data all over again and actually create a greater source of frustration, but actually you can move on and help that individual change direction and get to the place where they want to get to. So actually having that kind of a malleable approach, which is flexible, which is fluid, and which can take care and anticipate some of these customer requirements, that becomes really, really critical as you adopt digital technologies.
Thanks, Rohit. Yeah, you mentioned trends there, and we were talking about growth strategies. And Clarke, I wanted to ask you about a trend that you've seen towards actually appointing chief growth officers. They're becoming key roles in organizations.
They are, and it's basically the leadership role that's trying to execute what Rohit is saying is the kind of ideal location or destination. In essence, the chief growth officer, which has really come up over the last 18 months, again and again, or 24 months, again and again, is an enterprise-wide role, reports to the chief executive, that's looking at enterprise growth. It also needs to minimize duplication. It's got to break down the silos of different divisions or businesses. So they're cutting across geographies and brands to basically say, we're going to coordinate investments. We're going to jumpstart innovation enterprise-wide. So many of those pivots that Rohit just talked about, where the consumer's changing quickly, someone is saying, I'm going to look across the entire enterprise. And my job is not a supercharged CMO. My job is to be the advocate for a very powerful consumer to make sure the organization across the board is thinking longer term without silos or individual P&Ls to drive growth for the enterprise. So it's actually putting to work in existing organizations, or maybe, where David said they started from, what Rohit says is the ultimate goal. And we know that it's not simple, and you've got to cut across the organization to do that. So it's in essence, the brand builder with the P&L experience, not just a marketing experience.
I guess one of the challenges that such a person might have to deal with is bringing a legacy model across to digital, and companies that perhaps don't adapt them well enough, they risk losing market share if they're not tuned into the sort of Generation Z and millennials that constitute a bigger share of the market now. Perhaps I could ask David about this one. I mean, you've had a changing audience and demographic. I mean, how are you going with your brand now in trying to differ it and appeal to a different demographic?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, my current organisation, Esure, is 20 years old. We've actually become a bit of a veteran in the UK personal lines market. But my previous company, Aviva, is 300 years old. And so I'm in an industry that's been around for quite a long time. But there are a lot of companies that have risen and fallen during that period. And I think the old adage really applies here. You've got to adapt or die. And if I think about in our sector in particular, we've got a lot of activity from challenger brands, challenger companies, a lot of them in the west coast of the US, some of them in the UK, Israel, and so on. I think we've got over 10,000 insurtechs globally, attacking bits of our value chain, attacking high growth segments. So I think the key for relatively mature companies like myself is you've got to act a lot more like a startup. You've got to reinvent with the customer very much at the center of your business model. You've got to eliminate waste, and you've got to appeal right across the demographic set. So for me, digital first, mobile first is absolutely essential. That's certainly true for millennials and Generation Z, but it's equally true for most generations now. And you've got to just really orientate around digital, orientate around customer first, and something that Rohit talked about earlier, you've got to put data centricity right at the center of your business models.
Mm-hmm. Rohit, could you pick up on that in terms of the kind of advice you give to people who are trying to adapt to a legacy model for a new kind of digital first business?
Yeah, so let me break this thing up into legacy companies which have got legacy infrastructure as to how they should change and adapt. And then let me talk a little bit about what David was talking about, which is from the customer standpoint. And thinking about the customer, I don't think about legacy customers as being older customers, but the millennials and the Gen Z customers certainly being the younger and the ones which are looking for a greater amount of personalization, greater amount of agility and speed. But you also have to be able to approach the millennials and the Gen Z customer on an emotional level. And I think, David spoke about this, which is a higher purpose. So if you take a look at Lemonade, which is a digitally first, insurance company, it claims to process a claim in 3 seconds. And that's one of its hallmarks. But when you go onto the website of Lemonade, it's got a feeling to it, which is heavily targeted towards millennials and Gen Zs. Why? Because they have pet insurance right on top. They talk about the kind of social impact that they're making through this part of their business model. And all the graphics that are there are designed to be able to appeal to the millennials or Gen Z. So I think as you make that switch on a digital first kind of a business model, you have to appeal to the emotional part of your customer, whether that be an older demographic customer or whether that be a younger demographic customer. Now, let me just come back to legacy infrastructure and trying to move that towards a digital first infrastructure. I think most clients struggle with that shift because it's expensive, it's very hard to do by yourself, and there's no easy way of doing it. You know, if you try and convert everything that you've got, and David spoke about, you know, an insurance company which is 300 years old. If you try and convert everything that they've got from their legacy business model and their architecture to a digital first, model, it might take a decade to do that. And you can't wait for a decade to be able to make that change. So that big, shift is a difficult one. So what you really need to do is actually, you do need to do this in small pieces, but you need to do it end to end. So you can pick and choose a product, a service line, a geography, a customer base, whatever way you want to kind of slice your business, and then take that and on an end-to-end basis, convert that into a digital first and a mobile first platform. It doesn't help if you just do the front end and then your middle office and back office is analog and only your front end is digital, because you're going to get a customer who's going to be very unhappy with that change. It doesn't help if you can't provide the right information to the customer each time they ask you and query you, because otherwise you're going to create a greater amount of frustration than actually enhance customer experience. So you've got to look at it end to end. You've got to look at it by a process or by a service line or by a geography or a customer, and then continue to make agile moves and kind of keep doing this on an iterative basis so that you make the shift and you make the transition from legacy to a digital first kind of a business model. This is not easy. This is tricky because there are many pitfalls along the way. And I think that is what is really, really important, particularly in this environment where everybody is demanding a digital first capability absolutely right now.
Got it, yeah. And we're about halfway through the discussion, and I'd love to get some audience questions to ask you all at the end. So just a reminder, if you do have any questions, please type away in the box at the bottom of your screen, or to the right, I think it is, and we'll get to you in about 20 minutes time with those questions. Thank you. I'd like to ask a question myself about engagement now. How do you sustain customer engagement in a digital first business, and how do you keep people loyal to your brand? And I think, David, I'd be quite interested to ask you, because I think I've got insurance with Esure, but I only sort of hear from you or think about you once a year sometimes, if I want to renew my home insurance or car insurance. I mean, how do you keep me engaged, and what plans do you have?
Well, first of all, Chris, thank you for being a customer, and you're certainly now on my Christmas card list. Look, loyalty is hard. It's hard won, and it's hard maintained. And whether you're in digital or whether you're in analog, I think the key to it is you must create real value over time. And I think there's a number of elements to that. I think first, you've got to reward customers for staying longer with you and not rely on apathy. That's something my industry has historically done really, really badly. It's something we're changing as an industry, and it's certainly something we are changing as a company. I think also picking up one of the things Rohit mentioned, I think having an authentic purpose that speaks to more than just money is really important. So our purpose is fix insurance for good. So it has to appeal more broadly than just the shareholder. It's got to be about being a broader and more positive force for society. I think there's also something in driving loyalty, which is about sweating the small stuff and sweating the big stuff. So I'm a First Direct customer, And I've been a First Direct customer for 20, 25 years. First Direct has really, really showed up for me on the small stuff. It's excellent from an execution perspective. It hasn't always showed up for me on some of the bigger stuff. You know, when I was a little bit younger and I needed a loan and didn't get a loan. So I think really, really being there for customers in the key moments of truth, whether that's, you know, buying a home, whether it's serious illness, whether it's having children, or in my world, it's, you know, when somebody's home is flooded and they're up to their knees in water, really, really delivering for that event, which might be on average, it's once every 4 or 5 years for a customer that they claim. But if you really, really nail it, then you can have the customer's loyalty for a very, very long period.
Clarke, can I ask you about customer retention, loyalty? I think you've done some research on this, and it can, you know, if you can align a company's values with the customer, that is a great help in terms of keeping them coming back, as it were.
Yeah, I think this discussion over a year ago, which is a little bit forgotten, the COVID moment, about stakeholders versus shareholders, and I think it's pretty clear cut that you have to serve the stakeholders to make sure that you have loyalty with your consumers. And I think the institutional investors have made it very clear. They've made it clear to us as we speak to them about what kind of leaders they want. And sustainability, you know, has gone from something that was discussed to core to both employee retention and customer retention. We know, we talked earlier, how fickle a consumer can be. And I think they want to know not only when they're up to their knees in water, David, but how do you support crisis? Or your industry broadly defined support crises beyond the money, the claims, the experience. It's knowing that there's a bigger purpose there. And it's going to be not just the consumer retention, it's going to be great leader retention. And ultimately, it's going to become long-term investors saying, if this company is walking the walk, they will keep consumers longer term. You know, Hyatt Hotels was the first hotel chain that really went 9 or 10 years ago deeply into sustainability and power and water and all of this. And younger consumers stay there more often. So institutional investors want to hold the stock. So I think it's a kind of complicated web of DNA around loyalty, purpose, and certainly increasingly around sustainability and ESG.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chris, if I can add to that, you know, one of the things which I think consumers are looking for is speed. We all know that we are now living in a 60-second economy where people want to make a decision very quickly. They want to be served their product and service very quickly, and it's all about agility and speed. Well, speed, I think, is a double-edged sword. It can improve customer experience if you can offer the right product at the right time and do it in an agile, quick way. But speed is also very easy for a customer to switch between one company to another company because it only takes 60 seconds to switch over to your competition. So I think the question that you asked on customer loyalty is very, very fundamental and important. And I think we should not confuse customer experience, which is transactional, with customer loyalty, which is built over a period of time and has an emotional connect to it. And I think everything that David spoke about of higher purpose, or what Clarke spoke about, you know, in terms of, you know, institutional investors looking at sustainability, that becomes really, really important. So I think if you want to build customer loyalty, you have to have a series of high customer experience transactions over a period of time, but you need to build an association with a brand. You need to build an emotional connect. You need to build a connectivity to the higher purpose. You need to build a relationship with a human on the other side, because if everything is just cold, sterile, digital technology, you cannot build that emotional connect and you cannot build that customer loyalty. So I think, you know, customer loyalty is very, very important, and we shouldn't lose sight of that as we move towards digitally first business models.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can I switch back as a kind of nerdy kind of person though to that kind of cold, sterile technology for a second? And there's so many aspects to this. You touched on AI before, Rohit, and we've got things like robotic process automation gaining in popularity now. I just wondered if you could tell me how organizations should make best use of this data they're gathering and how they mine it to deliver their services more effectively.
Well, I can talk to you about data and AI for hours, but let me just try and put this thing down in
Just
a very
couple
short
minutes.
period of time. Yeah. So a big source of frustration for a customer is when their provider has the information about them and has data about them, but doesn't use that data to effectively be able to communicate and interact with them. So let me give you an example. You're a customer of a bank, and the bank has your bank account statement, knows exactly what kind of cash balances you have, knows how much payroll is deposited into your account, knows how much you spend, knows what's your investments. Now, somebody who's sitting on surplus cash, if that individual is going to be offered a product to take a loan, the customer is going to think that my bank doesn't know me, doesn't understand me, and doesn't even bother to figure out that actually what I'm looking for is how do I deploy that surplus cash and make a better return. And I'm not looking to borrow money, right? And it's a very simple and an obvious thing like that. But I think today the state of affairs is everybody is unable to actually make use of that data because that data is kept in silos. That data is not clean data. That data is not on the cloud. That data is not amenable for AI and ML to be applied onto it. And therefore, you've got a very, very big mismatch between a customer expectation and the power that you actually are sitting on with data which is right with you. And actually, you can enhance that capability by combining it with third-party data. So frankly, there's a huge amount of work that organizations need to do to make sure that they can shift their data onto the cloud. They can remove and eliminate these data silos. They can cleanse the data so that it is usable, and then actually start to offer things which the customer will appreciate and will really value. That's really the power of AI and the power of data. And I hope we can kind of make progress on that quickly.
Mm-hmm. And David, you must have practical examples of how you're using AI, perhaps, in there must be obvious areas like claims processing and fraud.
Yeah, I think I must completely agree with what Rohit's been saying. I mean, I think the key to data is it must serve the customer, not just the business. And I think data, if it's marshaled well, it gives you the opportunity for enormous amounts of personalization of a customer experience. And to your point, Chris, fraud's a very good example. There've been a lot of studies on insurance claims fraud globally. I think the average is probably, of all of those surveys, is that there is 10% of all claims are fraudulent in some way. So you've got a choice at either extreme. You either treat every customer really, really well, and you end up paying out claims for 10% of your customers, or you treat every customer badly, like a criminal, and you end up having a really, really bad customer experience, but you catch a lot of fraud. What I think advanced data science and AI gives you the ability to do is really, really intelligently go after fraudulent customers. So fraudulent customers get a really, really tough and exacting experience, which may end up resulting in criminal proceedings if it's extreme. But the 90% of customers that are really honest customers, good customers, get a really, really strong straight through experience that really, back to our earlier conversation, really helps to build loyalty. So I think data science is all, I mean, insurance has always been a data industry, but I think the acceleration of data science in our industry is quite marked. And I think if used properly, it can be quite profound for the customer in a positive way.
Of course, yeah. And Clarke, how important is it to have the right people there to extract the full value that you can get and use AI most effectively?
Yeah, well, I was curious, David said, or one of you said earlier on, you marshal the data correctly and then to use it, you just said at the end there, wisely. You know, we've learned a lot about diversity, not just in what's happened in 2020, but the first designs of some of those algorithms in many different businesses probably weren't as diversely designed as one would have hoped for. And so you had certain outcomes that didn't serve everyone. You need human judgment to design algorithms, and you need human judgment to look at the output to make sure it's being applied well. So the diversity of experiences and mindsets that are involved in this, I think, are super critical. And we've learned some big lessons in the past few years about you can maximize data and maximize the algorithms in AI, but the greater the diversity of thought, not just gender, ethnicity, but the diversity of thought in global organizations, again, look at Rohit's organization, is going to make all of that supercharged in results. And so I think we have a huge push around digital fluency and digital transformation in bringing along a diverse leadership team that brings more people along to transform companies faster, which is what really we're talking about here, is can you transform quickly in this crazy world we're in? And you're going to drive that through diverse leadership teams. So our work around diversity and DE&I has gone through the roof in the last 4 or 5 years, not just the last year, to maximize the opportunity of transformation.
Mm-hmm. And Clarke, can I stay with you on the people side of things? One last question for everyone, perhaps, before we get to the audience questions. Obviously, as the digitizing operations takes place, you have to shift corporate culture, you have to reskill, upskill employees, and nurturing, recruiting talent. Leadership must be crucial there. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we've actually done a lot of research, as you would expect, around what we call digital DNA and productive disruptors. So of course you need innovation, of course you need disruption, you need bold thinking, but you also need to bring people along with you, kind of the tail end of what I said before. And you found that the most successful, rapid, successful digital transformations, those people have an incredible ability to adapt to different audiences. They understand others and listen well. What they're doing, and we call it socially adept, is not at the cocktail party or the lunch. They're bringing people along in the transformation. So they're disruptive, they're bold, they're innovative, but they're bringing people along with them to create faster change. So the leadership aspects are quite different than the classic superhero leader of several decades. And I think that's where the productive disruptors, as we call them, really distinguish from classic leadership.
Mm-hmm. And David, I mean, I think you are addressing, give us some practical examples of how you are trying to upskill your employees and make them more adaptable for your business. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, well, I guess the context for us, and it may be similar to many organizations, but if you look out over the next 3 to 5 years, I think every single job in our organization will change. Many will be automated, many will change the nature. We believe it's our accountability as leaders to help enable our employees as best as possible to thrive. And that's about helping people to adapt their skill sets. It's helping people to be much more resilient personally to deal with change. And in some cases, it's helping people to get to their next job. Now, whether that's next job is in our company or in another company. And I think the right thing is to really invest behind this. We just launched our leadership program. The elements of the leadership program are about digital, it's about data, and it's about ability to change. And we'll roll that right out across the whole of our 2,000 employees.
Mm-hmm. And just finally, Rohit, before we go to questions, your thoughts on the importance of getting the right talent and reskilling people for the digital first businesses?
Thanks, Chris. I completely agree with Clarke and David on this. This whole shift towards digital first is a massive change management exercise, right? So that change management requires different kind of thinking and a different kind of skill set, like Clarke mentioned. But just like David said, I think every organization has to be a learning organization. And you have to be able to reskill your workforce at scale and do it repeatedly and kind of do it as a continuous process. So the change towards digital is not a one-step change, and it's not that it's a one and done. This is a journey, and this is going to continue to evolve because there are many digital technologies that we don't even know that are coming down the pike. There are different methodologies that we are not even aware of that are going to be out there. But so take a look at EXL. We've got 32,000 employees, and we've got to be able to make sure that we can reskill them as we go along and make sure that they are relevant for what our customers want us to do. So I think having that mindset of change and having an openness to adaptability, having diversity of thought for innovation and new ways of working, and then being a continuously learning and relearning organization at scale, that becomes really, really critical.
Thank you. We have so many questions. I hope we can get through a lot of them here. I'll start off. One, I don't know who sent this in, but how do you ensure that the human touch is not lost in a digital first business, as this has always been the key to loyalty? I think, Clarke, you spoke about empathy earlier and in leadership, and I guess you need to set the example from the top in these kind of things. Do you have thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think you do set the tone, and I think this, again, the 2020, the acceleration of change, and before it was like full steam ahead, we're going to do this, this is what the business requires, we've got to be competitive. And now you say, okay, I'm going to frame this for you in a broader context, and I'm going to help you get through this. You still need to deliver. It is a commercial enterprise. But I think the leadership has added an element of, whether it's empathy, level of communication, consistency of communication through this past 10 months that will differentiate the better leaders from the poorer leaders as it comes to transformation and change.
Mm-hmm. David, I thought you might have something to say about that as well in terms of keeping the human touch going.
Well, I think, from an employee perspective, the last 10 months have been incredibly stressful for many, many people. And I think we've tended to lean in massively as leaders in my organization. So the amount of communication that's going on, the amount of one-to-one engagement, the recognition that we're certainly, I think we're seeing in this country at the present moment, an explosion in mental health issues. And these are issues that were probably buried within families and buried within the individual. If you go back 20 years ago, they are a really, really big feature of the modern workplace. And I think certainly at Esure, we're taking real accountability and leaning in and trying to help people. I think on the customer side, I think both Clarke and Rohit have commented before. I think the idea of a purely robotic organization that everything is done by the algorithm is probably not the recipe for building really, really strong and enduring loyalty. So I think getting right the balance between automation and speed, and when it really counts or where it really matters, and this may vary between customers, really building in a degree of empathy and a degree of a personal touch. And that will vary by business, it will vary by customer, and it will also vary over time and situation. But setting up your organization to be able to do the digital automation, robotic stuff really, really well, plus the human touch. So what I call head and heart is really important.
That's a great answer, thank you. And I'll try and just come to one each of you for these questions, because we've got so many of them. So another question, how do you measure how a digital first approach is maintaining or improving your market share? Rohit, perhaps, I mean, are we talking about analytics tools there, or what kind of feedback, how do companies monitor how they're succeeding there?
Well, certainly there are metrics in terms of your revenue and profitability that are there, but I think you've got to take a look at some indicators which are going to be precursors to you actually gaining market share and actually getting a faster revenue growth rate and a higher profitability. So we spoke about customer experience, and I think a good customer experience is certainly going to be a precursor to winning and gaining market share, because that's going to be a differentiated capability and a way to engage with your customers that's going to allow you to take market share away from others. But there's also other things. I think Clarke spoke about innovation. I think whenever you can innovate and you come up with a new product or service that resonates with your customer group, that's going to allow you to be able to gain market share from your competition and allow you to kind of move forward. Convenience, making it easy for you to engage with your customers, that's going to be a way for to get greater market share. Pricing, speed, these are all things which are attributes which I think you can kind of lean into and make sure that you are in a position to gain market share from your competition.
Moving swiftly on, thank you for that. Customization is dependent on customers sharing their data. Are there some demographics which are still reluctant to share their data? And how do you overcome this reluctance? And perhaps I could ask David on this one, actually, because I'm sure he's trying to, insurance companies are trying to gather as much information as they can from various demographics. And what have you found in terms of how keen people are to tell you everything about themselves?
I don't know if I've got a insightful answer to this question. We obviously ask a lot of, traditionally we've asked a lot of questions of customers in order to underwrite policies, and that's pretty standard across the demographic. So we don't try to discriminate by demographic. What we're trying to do more generally is reduce the number of questions that we need to ask customers in order to speed up the process. So we're using, to earlier points by Rohit, we're trying to use data that we already have or data that is in the public domain. I think the other aspect of the question is you've got to be hugely responsible and ethical in the use of data, and not use people's data in ways that you're not authorized to do, and not use data in any way that seeks to discriminate in an inappropriate way. Sorry, I'm not sure I completely answered that question, but that's probably the best one.
That was a good stab at it. Yeah, that's fine.
If I can just add to what David just said, right? I think about this as data privacy and data security. Data security is an absolute must. It is regulated as well, and that has to be there. Otherwise, the customer just will not have the confidence to share information about himself or herself with you, right? Data privacy is, I think, what David is talking about, which is very correct, which is when a customer shares that information with you, if you use that information to provide a better product or a hyper personalization for that particular individual, I think that's something, and with their permission, I think that's something which customers will want. And we're seeing millennials and Gen Z are much more willing to share the information because they want the right offer to be made to them, and there's an expectation of that right offer being made to them. But when that data is misused, again, that trust that gets shattered, and that is something you have to be careful about.
Okay. A specific question for you, Clarke. How is Russell Reynolds using the digital revolution to competitive advantage? Can you tell us your company secrets?
Just immediately for the whole world. No, listen, we both guard data and use it wisely in terms of creating faster ways to get candidates in front of our clients. So we're analyzing things to find what's moving quickly trend-wise, what's moving quickly geographically wise, what companies are ahead and why, so that we're thinking it through to look at the process of company performance, executive performance, leadership performance, to then go approach the best in the market on behalf of our clients. So we've actually built Esure, the first firm that did. We thought everyone would be right behind us 4.5 years ago using AI tools to filter information faster. But I gather we're still the only company that's doing it in our industry.
Mm-hmm. We're running out of time, and I'm sorry if I don't get to all of these questions, but an important one here is, are customers being adequately protected from cybercrime, which appears to be growing exponentially? Could you perhaps talk about that, Rohit? I mean, security is particularly this week, as we've heard from the US Treasury, Commerce Department being hacked. Companies must feel very vulnerable when government institutions are being hacked and targeted in these kind of ways. What is being done in terms of protection? Is the challenge being met on that?
Yes, Chris. Unfortunately, cybercrime and cybersecurity is an ongoing war that is there between the bad actors who are trying to infiltrate and take out this information and misuse the information, and companies and corporates and governments and institutions trying to do their best to protect that information. And I think this is something which unfortunately will continue on for a while. The key really will be, can we get to different types of business models where the sharing of information is limited to only certain elements, and yet be able to give the organization a full perspective of that customer and be able to verify their background and their demographics and their capabilities, so that that can be useful. And I think cybersecurity is moving towards the parsing out of this data and storing the data in different buckets and different blocks, and assembling them at the time of use and disassembling them at the time of storage. And that will make it much more difficult for there to be cybercrime and misuse of this data, because you need to have multiple ways of actually piecing this data together before you can really misuse it or use it. So I think we're going to move somewhere in that direction.
Thank you, Rohit. I'm getting the winding up signs and signals, so that will have to be our last question. I'm really sorry we didn't get to some of the many others we've had there, but it's been such an interesting discussion, and it's obviously prompted that kind of interest in terms of questions. I'd like to thank Rohit Kapoor of EXL for joining us here for this, and EXL for sponsoring it and partnering with the Financial Times. Clarke Murphy from Russell Reynolds Associates, and David McMillan from Esure. Thank you, David. I'd like to thank you, the audience, for joining us. If you did enjoy this, please tell a colleague. You can share a link with your peers if they found it useful. We do keep a recording of the webinars on the website on demand for a month on the event website. And please see the highlights or have a replay if you found it useful. And thank you for joining us, everyone. And I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a happy holidays, and hope to see you all in the new year. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Well done.
Thank you, Chris.